a crisis that became the birthplace of innovation. It began in silence, the kind that descends when an organization realizes the ground beneath it is shifting. Numbers slipped, demand collapsed, and every familiar strategy failed at once. What looked like a routine downturn soon spiraled into a crisis threatening the company's very existence. But in the shadows of that collapse, something unexpected was forming. To understand why this story matters today, we need to return to a moment when the company's confidence vanished overnight. A sudden market shock exposed every weakness buried deep inside its structure. Leadership scrambled, running the same plays that had once carried them through smaller storms. But this time, nothing worked. Supply froze. Customers walked away. Competitors adapted faster. The company stood still, unsure which direction to move. Our story begins with a simple truth. Pressure reveals what comfort conceals. As losses mounted, one division within the company faced a brutal reality. Their product, once a leader in its space, had become irrelevant. Users complained about its slowness, its complexity, its inability to fit the new world forming around them. The division had spent years polishing features that no longer mattered, guided by metrics disconnected from what customers truly needed. Then came the moment everything changed. During a late-night internal review, a junior engineer presented a prototype they had built on their own time. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't polished, but it did something no one expected. It solved the exact problems customers had been shouting about for years. It addressed pain points leadership had ignored, offering a glimpse of what the product could become if the company dared to rethink everything. The room fell silent as the engineer explained how the prototype worked. It bypassed legacy systems the team believed were untouchable. It cut load times dramatically. It eliminated half the unnecessary steps users hated. It wasn't just a patch, it was a reset. At first, managers dismissed it as unrealistic, too risky, too disruptive, too different from the roadmap they had committed to. But the prototype carried something no official plan had produced in years: hope. A spark of possibility. And in a crisis where every familiar solution failed, possibility became impossible to ignore. What no one realized yet was that this small act of defiance, this quiet invention born in a moment of desperation, would spark a transformation that stretched far beyond the division, reshaping the company in ways no executive could have predicted. The prototype spread through the division like a secret. Engineers who had grown numb to endless meetings and outdated requirements felt something they hadn't felt in years: excitement. They gathered around screens after hours, testing features, breaking pieces, fixing them again. The junior engineer who built the first version suddenly found themselves at the center of a quiet movement. Not one built on directives from leadership, but on genuine curiosity and the need to build something that mattered. Yet the deeper the team dove into the prototype, the more they saw how misaligned the old product had become. Years of layered patches, legacy integrations, and neglected complaints had turned it into a slow, rigid machine. The crisis had only intensified the problem. The world demanded speed, adaptability, and simplicity. But the company had spent years creating the opposite. As the unofficial team explored the new version, they discovered more opportunities for transformation. Workflows that once required multiple approvals could be automated. Interfaces that confused users could be rebuilt from the ground up. Entire features that had once seemed essential turned out to be dead weight. Each discovery widened the gap between what the product was and what it could become. But the movement wasn't entirely welcome. Word reached senior managers who viewed the prototype not as innovation, but as a threat. They feared what it implied: that the roadmap they had defended was outdated, that customer complaints they dismissed were valid, and that the company's survival depended on ideas coming from outside the hierarchy. Meetings were called. Questions turned accusatory. Some suggested shutting the project down entirely. The tension peaked when an executive confronted the team, warning them that unauthorized development could create liability issues. The room went silent. But before the team could respond, the junior engineer quietly offered a simple explanation. The crisis left them no choice. The old system was failing, and if the company didn't reinvent the product now, competitors would do it for them. Surprisingly, the argument didn't lead to punishment. Instead, it planted a seed of doubt in leadership. The crisis had stripped away the illusion of control. The failing numbers, the shrinking customer base, the accelerating competition, they all pointed to the same truth. Stability was gone. Innovation wasn't a luxury, it was oxygen. So leadership made an unexpected decision. They allowed the team to continue on one condition. They had to prove the prototype could work at scale without breaking the fragile systems keeping the company afloat. That challenge became the dividing line between skepticism and belief. The next phase would determine whether the prototype was a clever experiment or the key to saving the company from collapse. The challenge to prove the prototype at scale pushed the team into a realm they had never navigated before. What began as a quiet after-hours project now carried the weight of the company's survival. The junior engineer, once overlooked in crowded meetings, suddenly found themselves leading daily stand-ups, coordinating efforts, and translating technical breakthroughs into language executives could understand. The shift was surreal, but the urgency left no room for hesitation. The first obstacle emerged almost immediately. The old infrastructure, patched and repatched over years, buckled under the demands of the new system. Processes that had never been questioned revealed hidden dependencies no documentation had ever mentioned. One module triggered errors in another. Data pipelines clogged under workloads they were never meant to handle. Every fix exposed another flaw, a reminder of how deeply the old product's problems were buried. As the team fought through these setbacks, the crisis outside the company deepened. Competitors gained ground. Customers grew louder in their frustration. News outlets speculated whether the company could survive the year. Each headline drove home the same message. If the prototype didn't work, there might not be another chance. Still, progress came, slowly, unevenly, but undeniably. The team created a parallel environment, isolating the prototype from the fragile legacy system. They rewrote ancient code nobody had touched in a decade. They built new tools to automate testing, cutting weeks off timelines that once stretched endlessly. And each improvement made the prototype feel less like an experiment and more like a future taking shape. But not everyone celebrated the progress. A faction of senior employees believed the crisis would eventually fade, insisting the company should preserve its existing systems until stability returned. They accused the team of moving too fast, risking too much, and ignoring the lessons that had once made the product a market leader. Their resistance slowed approvals, delayed budgets, and fueled internal debates that drained time the company didn't have. The breaking point arrived when a critical component of the old system failed unexpectedly, triggering disruptions across multiple regions. Customer complaints surged, refund requests spiked, support teams scrambled to contain the damage. Leadership gathered in an emergency meeting, desperate for a solution. And for the first time, the prototype wasn't treated as a risky bet. It was treated as the only viable path forward. With the board's reluctant blessing, the team was granted full access to the resources they had been denied for months. Engineers from other divisions volunteered to help. Designers reworked interfaces. Analysts pored over user data. The company, once divided, began aligning around a single objective: get the prototype ready for real users. The pressure was immense. Every setback felt catastrophic. Every breakthrough felt like a lifeline. And as the launch window approached, the company held its breath. The crisis that had threatened to destroy everything was now accelerating the biggest transformation in its history. All that remained was the moment of truth, the release that would determine whether the prototype could withstand the world outside the lab or collapse under the weight of expectations. The launch unfolded in a tense quiet. No fanfare, no grand announcement, just a gradual rollout to a carefully selected group of users who had grown tired of the old system but hadn't yet abandoned the company entirely. Engineers monitored dashboards through sleepless nights. Managers hovered behind screens, afraid to breathe too loudly. The company's future hinged on a product built in defiance, shaped in crisis, and released under a spotlight no one had asked for. The first hours were fragile. A minor error triggered panic before it was quickly patched. A server spike forced an emergency routing change. But as the night stretched into morning, something remarkable happened. The graphs stabilized. Performance held. Feedback shifted. From anxious to curious, then from curious to impressed. Users who had once written harsh complaints now sent messages of relief. The product didn't just work, it made sense. Word spread faster than anyone anticipated. Early adopters shared their experiences with colleagues. Teams inside client companies requested access. What began as a cautious trial escalated into widespread demand. The prototype, once nearly shut down as an unauthorized passion project, now carried the weight of a resurgence the company desperately needed. Meanwhile, the old product continued to crumble under the pressure of the ongoing crisis. The contrast was impossible to ignore. The legacy system represented everything the company used to be: safe, predictable, comfortable, and outdated. The new product represented everything it needed to become: responsive, intuitive, fearless in the face of change. And for the first time in months, leadership felt something they hadn't felt since the crisis began: momentum. The climax arrived when the full rollout went live. Millions of users gained access. Customer satisfaction surged. Support tickets fell to levels the company hadn't seen in years. Analysts who once predicted the company's collapse now called the turnaround one of the boldest recovery stories in the industry. The crisis hadn't just forced innovation, it had created it. In the final weeks of the transition, the junior engineer stood in front of the division to share the journey from prototype to product. No one applauded at first. Not because they didn't appreciate the achievement, but because they were overcome by the realization of how close they had come to losing everything. The applause came later, slow, then rising, then overwhelming. What began as a desperate attempt to solve a failing product had become the foundation of a cultural rebirth. The crisis didn't break the company. It broke the assumptions holding it back. It forced leaders to listen, teams to collaborate, and innovators to take risks they once avoided. Looking back, the story offers a truth worth carrying forward. Sometimes the future hides inside ideas overlooked in calmer times. Sometimes the spark that saves an organization is found in the hands of someone nobody expected to lead. Subscribe to join the journey. A crisis